Hi, it's Tony at ExecuNet. Thanks for tuning in today. The challenges senior executives commonly face: a transition, a career that is uninspiring or not advancing, and a few of the obstacles we all encounter daily in the world of work can really stop us in our tracks, both professionally and emotionally, unless, of course, we understand how to override limiting beliefs and get back on track and stay on track. Today, I'm speaking with Ami Nielsen from the UK. With over 10,000 coaching and mentoring hours, she has been helping high achieving executives like you get their career and life back on track by unblocking limiting beliefs. Her clients are predominantly from known brands from different industries, such as the BBC, Discovery, Sony, Virgin Atlantic, Penguin Random Books, to name a few. Ami, it is lovely to be speaking with you.
Thank you for having me on.
My pleasure. So talk to me, please, about limiting beliefs. How do you define a limiting belief compared with a limiting reality?
Okay, interesting question. So limiting belief is obviously by the nature of the word itself, limiting, keeping somebody in a situation that they're not entirely happy with. The reality obviously can be something different, but that's the belief that has been set up, if you will. That's the belief system that they're running in the background. So they might perceive something in one way, but actually the reality or the facts may be presented maybe something different.
hmm So let's talk specifically about executives who are in transition, in
Mm.
search. What are some of the sets of limiting beliefs that we tell ourselves are true?
Okay, so if we just put it in context of what's happening in the world today, it's a very interesting time to be alive because there's a lot of transition going on. From a global perspective, obviously, a lot of transition with regards to the political system, the education system breaking down. So all of that is already moving, and there's some transition. And then we have within organizations, of course, a knock-on effect of what's actually happening politically, and the consumers have more power. So businesses in which we are working obviously are having a shift as well. So they're in transition. So when we arrive at the employee, the senior executives who are now running these organizations, of course, there's a knock-on effect to them. And some of the challenges that they're facing relate to how am I going to manage this change that's happening, ricocheting, globally from the outside in. And then, of course, and then there's the personal shift that's going on as well. We know very well that the age of consciousness is arriving as well. So we have all of this happening, and the senior executives are sitting in a very important position of leadership. And so some of the limiting beliefs that I'm encountering, the things that they are saying is, am I the right leader for this transition? And it might mean that, am I the right person to take this forward? But also, what do I have the skills? Yeah, so the skills could be the technical skills, but it's very much about, am I the right person, internally? So it's the inner game that we're talking about, this consciousness. Am I the right leader to influence my staff or the processes that we're running to shift into this new way of working? So a lot of it is around the limiting belief of it could be imposter syndrome. Yeah, am I good enough for this? Or it could be, do I have the skills? It could be anything like, how am I going to cope? Yeah, am I coping? And it leads to things like overwhelm, anxiety, stress. These are the symptoms. And one of the things that I'm finding, and the WHO have now recognized it, is that burnout is now an epidemic. And burnout isn't just the staff in the lower rungs, it's everybody. And often the leaders are just expected to still show up every day to lead. And how do you do that when you're sitting sort of in isolation? Are you willing to tell your other board members or the CFO or the COO that you are not coping well? And so the limiting beliefs are really associated with the external, actually what's happening, and the internal. And it's really sort of through that transition that I work, which is obviously with the internal, in order to manifest the external. So there are lots and lots of different conversations going on.
And that could easily affect a job candidate as well, right? So if you're sitting in that chair across from an interviewer and combating both the external and the internal, you could be hurting, and you really can't show that too much as well, right?
Absolutely, and this is where the conversation leads to resilience, things like that. If you have something going on, and it could be that you're the prime candidate for a position, but something's happened on personal level, you still have to go to the interview, and you're going through a life transition. I mean, it can be that something's happened within the family unit, or something's happened to you, but you still have to show up. And it's that ability to still show up, to know how to overcome some of these challenges, that it's a mental game, but also it's an internal game. It's a sort of a heart space game, if you will. So I'm
Yes.
working very much with mindset, but also with heart set, and trying to align the two in order for these executives to present themselves in the best way. And then what would stand in their way is the limiting belief about, am I able to cope when I have this situation also happening, at home or in my private life.
I love the way you set that up, the heart space. So
Mm.
stepping off of that, how do you unlimit an executive's beliefs?
Okay, so it's for me, it's a journey, as you can see, from inside out.
Mhm.
We can pretend, as you say, the reality is one thing, but actually we will know for ourselves whether or not that is the true reality for us. So one of the so there are three aspects that I look at. One is actually doing a diagnostic in a way. So we do Myers-Briggs, or I work with DISC. So it's really about understanding what is the behavior that they're displaying. First, I have to take a view on what's the behavior that they're displaying. And if we know what the personality traits are, and what the behavior is, then we have a sense of we know that it's needs driven. So we have a sense of what's the starting point, how are they presenting themselves. The second bit is going into what I'm calling the sort of the heart space. So it's a heart set, going back a bit in history, is understanding where they've come from, what's the narrative that they come from, because that's going to be running and influencing the behavior that they're displaying in the interview, in their job, whether they can do this job or not. And that really entails going back and looking at the negative events that have happened in their life, because we have a pattern. And once we've established a pattern, we can get hold of the limiting belief, the actual limiting belief. One will be the conscious limiting belief, and the other one will be the unconscious limiting belief. And once we've got hold of that, and because we are adults, we have to have a logical left brain explanation for why we're behaving in a certain way. We can then give them I can basically give them the evidence that if they continue, yes, and they say yes to this job, and they haven't sorted out this internal game, then the same thing's going to probably happen. They're going to feel like an imposter and they can't do it and all this kind of stuff. And they might not have the resilience to take on this job. So it's really about doing the whole thing, eliciting the limiting belief. And once we've got hold of that limiting belief and they can see the logic, then it's much easier for adults to go, okay, yes, I understand what that is. And then we marry that up with what we've done before, the diagnostic on the behavior. And then we can tell whether the behavior is true to their nature or not. So if it's not true to their nature, they're going to be in misalignment anyway. So there's no point in actually continuing with the interview. Why are you interviewing with this company anyway? Or why are you interviewing for this promotion when you know that's not really where your heart sits? Or this is not really where you want to go, because it doesn't suit your temperament. So we can't ask you to be the CFO if you want to just be out and about with the people. You want to be the spokesperson, then that's where you have to go. But because we have the negative emotional events in our history, they are coloring it. They're giving us a different sense of what the reality is what you were alluding to. What is the reality and what is actually going on? So once we've established that, the third point is actually to start to engage. Then we will often rewrite the CV in their style, so that effectively we're giving the message, this is what I want, and obviously the feedback should be marrying up. If not, then of course, there's no point in interviewing in that place. It's more likely that you will be matched up correctly, because of course that's what you put out. So our messaging is managing our own PR, effectively managing our brand. And then it's experimenting, and then it's asking the salient questions around what it is that relates to you. But hopefully by the time you get to the interview stage and engaging like that, you will be able to test out new belief systems. And often I have quite a few executives who we transition through several jobs. They're going through several jobs knowing that they haven't emotionally engaged with it completely. They're still technically doing the job really well, but we're sort of going through a transition until they arrive at the place where they have actually effectively dispelled any of their their limiting beliefs, and actually that they're happy with the job that they want to do. They want to do it, and they want to make a difference there, and therefore they're fully engaged.
Mhm.
Does that?
It does. That emotional um, acuteness is so
Mm.
critical, it seems. And I guess I'm curious, when you're working with executives, how difficult is it for them to align the direction they want to go in with their natural, I think the way you put it is their
Mm.
natural state, because sometimes those are in conflict. And if we don't see that about ourselves, we might go down a path that really isn't the right one for us. Yes?
Yeah, excellent question. Um, yes, and that has to do with a lot of external factors. It could be cultural. It could be my all of my ancestors were lawyers or doctors or accountants. So it's sort of a family heritage that you have to go into that line of work. So this will obviously come out in the in the process, and it's just it depends on how brave the person is to make that change, and often then again the limiting beliefs will surface. Yeah, I'm too old. It's a young person's game. I can't do it. I can't cope. What's my family going to say? I'm going to lose my lifestyle. Can I make any money doing that? But there are different alliterations of what that might look like, and it's trying to find the if that's the case, try to find the balance. Yeah, but it's better to know why you are not feeling aligned with the work. So I have quite a few barristers here in the UK who are deeply unhappy because it's a very, in a way, isolating, but because traditionally their family was doing this line of work, they're kind of stuck in it. But that their temperament is so different from it. Yeah, but they've done all those years of schooling and they paid all that money for this and that and that, and they passed all these exams. And how do I get out of it? But it's not how do I get out of it. It's actually disengage yourself emotionally from it. Do it because you do it really well.
Hmm.
Yeah, and you're obviously being recognized for it. And then use the other part of your life to bring those needs up. Yeah, to meet that part of your temperament.
Hmm.
Because we only live once, don't we? And it's really about finding what resonates. Yeah, and it might have, some of these people obviously have responsibilities beyond the job, so it's something that we would sit and weigh up. Well, what is it? But if you're not fulfilled, you're not fulfilled, and we've got to figure out what's the solution.
Right. So
Mm-hmm.
tell me, Ami, please, about your career journey, your life journey. We only live once, and you've had a ride as well. And I'm just curious how you arrived at the point where you find yourself helping others through this experience of unlimiting their beliefs. Tell me a little about your journey.
Um, well, really, I mean, it's to cut a story short. It really starts with a family tragedy. So I was working in Japan, and I moved to the UK, thinking I could, now start my career. And within 6 months of me arriving here, my father died of a heart attack, and that meant at the age of 24, I had to make some decisions about what I was going to do. Was I going to go back to Japan, where my family was residing at the time, or was I going to stay in the UK? And having come from the from an advertising situation in Japan, working for a very sort of rigid environment, I really wanted to stay in the UK. They had invited me to come back to work for them, but I opted to stay in the UK. And so I stayed in the UK, but what happened was I just went to work. I just went to work, and it was probably, it must have been, and I was sent abroad. I had an expat assignment to Singapore, spent 4.5 years. I just went to work for, I don't know how, 7, 8 years, until one day I realized that, one, I was working all hours of the day. I was on the, with the startup, you're working 24 hours a day. I was drinking between meetings. Yeah, so I was on my way to burnout, and I simply wasn't happy. I had all the trimmings of the work. You can have holidays here wherever you could fly off to. I was working for a very interesting brand. It was a youth brand. That was fun. You can run around, but I wasn't having fun. Yeah, so it just came to a halt one day, and I'd come home from a meeting, and I'd obviously arranged the meeting so that I could go drinking in between, and I was just numb. And so I arrived home one day, and I thought, okay, well, I've just got to make a decision here. Yeah, it's either I continue like this and pretend it's okay, or I make a shift. And that's the point at which, and everybody has a turning point. You know, how much can you stand it? And obviously I could stand it a long time. I must have learned something from being in Japan in the endurance. But it was, then I had to quit everything and I start over again. And so I left the country. Everybody was saying, oh, you're never going to get a job like this again. You know, we were going to send you to China, blah, blah, blah. And I came back to the UK and started all over again. But at that point, I then sat down and I worked out, okay, well, if I'm going to do this, I'm going to have to do a transition. And I don't know how long this transition is going to take, but I'll start with something. I'll get a job that I can do without actually really engaging that deeply emotionally, set all the boundaries of what I need, tell them that I'm retraining. And if they don't like it, then I'll go for another job. And then I started retraining, and I trained as a reflexologist, a yoga instructor, looking for things, a counselor. I did a foundation in psychotherapy, and then this is all while I was working. And then finally, I obviously landed with the coaching, the coaching work, and that's really was a transition over 8-9 years. I mean, it took me that time because I didn't have a coach. I didn't have the knowledge. I mean, the US is so much further ahead than the UK. So and that's really where I thought, okay, this marries up with what I do. I mean, I was in sales and business development, so the coaching aspect of it, having a goal going forward rather than going backwards, was really what spoke to me, and that's why I'm doing this. And really, it's making a difference. I don't want anybody to experience this thing and sit with it for longer than is necessary. It's good to have a little bit of pain so that it motivates you to go forward, but there's no point in sitting in a burning couch. It doesn't make any sense. So the strategy is really always a towards strategy for me, and that's what I'm interested in. That's what I'm primed for in terms of my career history. And I thought I'm never going to do sales, but actually that it now comes into play because it's actually quite useful in terms of the mentality and the goal-oriented aspect. And the people that I work with are always going to be a similar profile to me, because obviously I know how to find those types of clients, and that is we're having fun and we're moving things ahead. So that's my sort of journey in a nutshell.
That's terrific. Thank you for sharing it. So what lies ahead for you? What do you think is next?
What do I think is next? Okay, well, there's quite a lot. I mean, I'm quite interested in education, so I'm working with my children's school and trying to change that, because it really starts there with how the education system sets us up for work. I'm doing this sort of the remedial work, if you will, on this side with the corporates, but there's plenty of work that could be done already to mitigate for that. So we're talking about resilience, we're talking about obviously empathy, we're talking about kindness, we're talking about all these things in school, but you've got to remove the old structures. Get rid of the bell, get rid of, have lunch together. Maybe the day has to change, maybe fewer days, maybe the parents need to be more involved. So it's all this happening. So it's almost sort of hoping that the next generation of employees and leaders will through their education, be able to cope with a much faster paced environment than the one that we have grown up in, the one we experienced, although we at our age would have had a lot of the contrast. So that's what I'm doing. And the other thing is looking at mentoring more coaches, because there's so much work to be done, and it's not a negative to have a coach, it's actually a positive. So trying to encourage more coaches to get on board and to do this work, sort of what I'm calling, because I'm coming from advertising, but through the line. There's no point in just plastering it. We have to actually do the whole scale work. And there's some tremendous people out there in terms of leaders, and it's just switching them on to this heart set notion. And that for me it's just you ignite something, and then of course they're going to pass it on, and that's wonderful. So that's what I'm looking at, and it's already happening. I mean, I have so many interesting conversations. It's such a blessing to do this type of work.
Well, it's terrific. Well, thank you so much for sharing a piece of that with us, and I look forward to talking to you more about that heart space and finding a way through our unlimiting beliefs. Thank you very much, Ami.
You're welcome.
Talk to you soon.
Speak to you soon.